Hi everybody, I'm Ryan, and that's Misha. Today we're going to talk about Yawgmoth, black-green Yawgmoth in Modern. We're going to talk about card choices, how to play the deck, some combos within the deck, because it's kind of literally a combo deck, hi Misha. And it's going to be a deck, and you know how these go. Let's do it. So this is black-green Yawgmoth. It's a pretty cool creature deck, relies a lot on undying creatures and combos within these undying creatures. We're going to kind of go through the deck. We're going to talk about card choices first, and then we'll talk about some combos that might be kind of thrown in together, though. So the first section of the deck is our mana dorks. We're playing 4 Ignoble Hierarch and 3 Birds of Paradise. Ignoble Hierarch creates black and green mana, so it's just as good as Birds of Paradise, except it has Exalted, which is why we're playing more Ignoble Hierarch than Birds of Paradise. We're playing these cards both to help with our convoke spells like Court of Calling and to be able to sacrifice to Eldritch Evolution or like other things, you know, with Grist or Yawgmoth or whatever, and to be able to cast our cards much faster, just like you would play any other mana dork. Similarly, as far as like in the context of like better convoke spells, playing some Colony Gardens to be able to have some O1 plants to be able to sacrifice and have convoke spells and stuff like that. Some Golgari Rot Farms to be able to return the Colony Gardens and whatnot. But the rest of the mana base is pretty straightforward. The Besages, obviously, for artifacts and enchantments and lands that we're worried about. But other than that, the mana base is super straightforward. The next section of our deck is the Undying Creatures. So these Undying Creatures, Yawgmoth and Stranglerootgeist, are one really hard to manage and kill. Like we can just attack with them normally because they're green creatures. But also, Undying Creatures lead to other strategies within the deck because Undying is worded that they get a +1/+1 counter on the creatures, which makes Hapatra really, really good. Meaning that when it deals combat damage to a player, you can put a -1/-1 counter on target creature, which means this deals combat damage and you can reset the Undying. In addition, when -1/-1 counters are put on creatures, you get a 1/1 green snake, which means that you can go infinite later with Yawgmoth, which we'll talk about in just a second. It's a one-of to search up with Eldritch Evolution or Court of Calling. Speaking of, let's talk about these other one-ofs. We're playing a Blood Artist, a single Blood-Off, again, to search up with Eldritch Evolution or Court of Calling, because we can go infinite with Yawgmoth stuff and Hapatra by sacrificing creatures, and if you do that and you have a Blood Artist on the battlefield, you win the game. You can even go infinite with the Yawgmoth and 2 Undying Creatures. I'll explain that combo again after we go over each card, but any way that you go infinite sacrificing creatures, if we have a Blood Artist on the battlefield, we win. Similarly, if we have a Prosperous Kinkeeper, if we have Undying Creatures keep entering the graveyard and coming back, and then we can recycle that for basically ever, we can gain infinite life. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain a life. Playing Wall of Roots, it is another mana dork, but also it counts as 2 for Court of Calling, because you can minus it to give a -0/-1 counter and add a green to your mana pool, and you can tap it. So it's really, really good alongside Court of Calling, and it's a fine blocker against aggressive decks. We're playing 2 Endurance. Just like really solid graveyard hate. Also, it entering can, trigger Prosperous Innkeeper. It dying can trigger Blood Artist. You know how it is. We're playing 4 Grist. Grist makes a lot of sense in a deck like this. Its +1 can create 1/1s, so that we are able to Court of Calling and Eldritch Evolution just a little bit easier. Its -2 is really good alongside Undying Creatures and some creatures that kind of don't matter later on in the game, like the Mana Dorks. Where we can sacrifice creature and destroy creature Planeswalker, which is awesome. And if we get deep into the late game, we can -5 to sometimes just win the game. One thing to remember about Grist, which I'm sure you know if you play enough Modern, is that it is a creature, right? Outside of the battlefield. Not only that, but it's a 1/1 insect. So if you plus and mill another one of your Grists, you get to do it again and get 2 insects. Also, it can't be spell pierced, which is really, really good. And we're playing 4 Yawgmoth, which is what the deck is named after. You can pay a life, sacrifice creature, and put a -1/- counter on up to 1 target creature and draw a card. This is really, really good alongside these. Undying Creatures can lead to a lot of really cool infinite combos. And really, it's just like, even if you're not infinite comboing, just like being able to draw through your deck is very powerful, especially alongside creatures that recur. And then our tutor effects, we're playing 4 Court of Calling, 3 Eldritch Evolution. They do similar things. Eldritch Evolution is basically a birthing pod on a stick. We sacrifice creature and then grab a creature whose mana value is X +2, where X is the mana value of a sacrificed creature. And Court of Calling, where, it has Convoke, so we have a lot of creatures, so we can Convoke very easily to search a library for a creature card mana value X or less and put that on the battlefield and then shuffle. So Eldritch Evolution means if we sacrifice a mana dork, then we can grab Endurance or Grist. If we sacrifice, one of these 2 mana things, then we can get to grab Yawgmoth, and then Court of Calling can grab anything when we Convoke with it. So let's talk about some of these combos really quick, because this deck is basically just a creature deck, a value deck. You know, everything's pretty straightforward besides the combos. I'm going to go over some of the major ones and the major ones that you're going to see. So first off, the primary combo, I'm going to get everything kind of, let me get everything kind of off to the side here. So obviously these combos can be assembled naturally, and they can be assembled by Chord of Calling and Eldritch Evolutioning out the stuff that you're missing. The first big combo, and this is not quite infinite, is Yawgmoth and 2 Undying Creatures. Yawgmoth and 2 Undying Creatures is essentially infinite, pay 1 life, and draw a card. Because if there is already a +1/+1 counter on one of the Undying Creatures, you can sacrifice the other Undying Creature, right? It'll come back with a +1/+1 counter and put a -1/-1 counter on the Undying Creature that already has a +1/+1 counter on it. Sacrifice that one that now does not have a +1/+1 counter on it because there's a -1/-1 counter on it. It comes back, put the -1/-1 counter on the other Undying Creature. And you can do that infinitely, which means that yes, you lose a life every time you do it, but you can draw cards equal to the life that you have. Now this gets kind of cooler alongside Blood Artist. If you do this with Blood Artist on the battlefield as well, then you win the game, because you are regaining the life that you lose every time you sacrifice a creature from Yawgmoth, but also your opponent loses life and they do not regain that life. So you draw infinite cards and you deal infinite damage and you just win the game. This is probably one of the most common situations. A kind of really cool one is if you have a Patra, you can also kind of create these like kind of infinite snakes. So like you do this combo or like, you know, anything like that. You know, you can create infinite snakes if you have 2 Undying Creatures, or I say infinite, like the amount of life that you have, this does not regain you life. Or if you have 1 Undying Creature, it gets kind of cool because you can sack the Undying Creature, -1/-1 counter on like Hapatra or something, right? It becomes a 1/1. You get a snake, and then you can sacrifice the snake, -1/-1 counter on the Strangleroot with the Undying counter on it. It goes back to like not having an Undying counter on it, but a -1/-1 counter was still put on, so you get another snake. Right, and then you sacrifice Strangleroot -1/-1 counter on the snake, but it was a -1/-1 counter, so you get another snake. Undying comes back, right? And you can do it pseudo-infinitely while drawing as many cards as you do life. You can also do this with Prosperous Innkeeper. All these different ways, right? It can be this combo, you know, allows us to draw infinite cards to eventually hit the Blood Artist. Again, we can do this combo, which allows us to draw infinite cards until we hit the rest of what we need. And again, you can search up missing pieces of this combo with Chord of Calling and Eldritch Evolution. And, you know, the rest of the deck is just like a really solid creature deck. There are other combos that are kind of hidden, but those are the most common ones. And this is just like a basic overview of the deck, so I don't want to go in super duper depth. As far as the sideboard goes, we're playing Crime and Punishment, obviously for the punishment side, because you can't really cast the crime side without Birds of Paradise. Destroy each artifact, creature, and enchantment value X. That's for these artifact decks like Hammer Time. Haywire Might, again, for artifact and enchantments that we're worried about. Fatal Push for basically aggressive decks. Fatal Push is just a great magic card. Thoughtseize for these combo decks that we're really worried about them doing their thing before we do our thing. Filigree Xylex, you know, for anything that plays like a lot of 0/1 mana spells. Necromentia, again, for combo pieces. Endurance as more graveyard hate, and to join our Endurance is already in the main deck. We're playing Phyrexian Metamorph, for if they have anything that's really important that we copy. So I'm thinking things like Archon of Cruelty the turn after they do it. I think it's pretty solid in the mirror match as well. It's also really funny against Scam. It's kind of a funny thought. Pylon, it's really easy for us to convoke, so destroying a creature or planeswalker is really solid. This is often just a free spell. And Force of Vigor, again, for these artifacts and enchantments. So if you liked this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social media. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you so much for watching. Check me out on Twitch as well. I stream most of this. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.